Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we will now move on to our next panel discussion. That is, of course, an interesting one because it is on the topic of data and creativity. And how data and creativity can work together, where our panelists are going to tell you how creativity can become data-driven and personalized, and how can data fuel and enhance creativity. So how they are related to each other and how they can sort of support each other, these two elements. Please welcome on stage our session chair for this panel discussion. We have Puneet Awasthi, Director, Specialist Businesses, Insights Division, Kantar, joining us on stage. Welcome, Puneet. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. And now I would like to introduce our panelists to all of you. We have Prasun Kumar, CMO for Just Dial. Please give it up for Tabraiz Alam, Chief Data and Strategy Officer, Bobble AI. Sumeli Chatterjee, Head Integrated Marketing Experiences, India and Southwest Asia, the Coca-Cola Company. Please give it up for Ruchika Gupta, CMO, Luminous Power Technologies. And lastly, Udit Malhotra, Head of Marketing, MG Motor India. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all our panelists here on stage. And now I would request Puneet Awasthi to lead the talk, and let's set the ball rolling. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Are we audible to everybody right at the rear? Audible? Okay. So it's a very interesting topic that we're going to be discussing here. We are now living in a world where there is so much data that is being created through all our interactions with our transactions, whether they are on social media, whether they are on Google search or e-commerce, all of that data as such. And of course, there's a lot of first-party data as well that businesses, marketers have. How is it that they are, they're using this data for multitude of purposes as such? But the important question here that we are going to be addressing ourselves to is whether this data, and particularly this world of data-driven decision-making, is in any manner relevant for creative development. And if so, how is it being used as such by marketers? And we've got a very varied panel as such, which are people representing very different industries. We've got Udit here from MG Motors. We've got Ruchika from Luminous. We've got Sumeli from Coke. We've got Tabraiz from Bobble, and Prasun from Just Dial. So it's a very varied set of panelists as such, people with very different experiences given the kind of categories that they are handling and the kind of requirements that they have in terms of being able to respond to consumer requirements on a day-to-day basis and communicate with them in the right moment as such, at the right time when the consumer is likely to be purchasing a particular product. And there are multiple nudges that are possible as such. It's not just about having a great creative as such, which is a 30-second television commercial, but it's also about being able to give the consumer the right nudge at the right moment, because the data world actually provides that information 24/7. So without any further ado, let's try and understand this entire ecosystem and how it is playing out in the space of creative. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll start with first really putting the elephant here in the room across to everybody. And I would want everyone to respond to it as such, which is, do you believe that data and creativity as such are mutually exclusive? And the other question is, it might be currently or may not be. Should it be exclusive at all as such? Or do they need to interact? Do they need to talk to one another? Would you want to go first?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I think the straightforward answer to this is they should complement each other and they should not be mutually exclusive. When we talk about data in particular, generally it's only thought from a function perspective of how would, let's say, marketing derive it. But the bigger question is that as marketeers or as businesses, do we have a data mindset? Do we have an audience first mindset? And that is what can power your creative for now and the future. So it is a complementing exercise. It's not mutually exclusive. They are inclusive and complementing to each other. And that's how I see it going. But there is one fact that data can enable creativity. It's not there to demolish creativity or take control over creativity. So that's my perspective.
Hi, I think from my point of view, the simple, simile or metaphor I can draw is that data for me is the ingredients and creativity is the recipe. You need the right ingredients and the right recipe to come together to deliver a great dish. It's as simple as that, whether it means in terms of developing the actual campaign, whether it means actually the media usage that you put out there. And I know we were having a lot of discussions, in the panel room. And I don't think there is a scenario in which you can have only one of them, because then you will be either shooting in the dark without any data and relying only on your creative, gut or instinct or whatever that may be, or you may be so lost in data that it may, lead you to, like I guess the discovery of America rather than coming on your route to India. So that's where I stand.
Interesting.
Okay, so for me, the one word that beautifully sums up what data or creativity means is actually cloud. It's as creative and as analytical as it can get. So literally, like when I would talk to my kid and I have to say cloud, the one which is up in the sky, because for him possibly the cloud which actually makes more sense is which has the data which goes back into whatever he's doing on computer. So to me, it's not about data and creativity, it's how much data and how much creativity. And I also think that that depends on what life stage the brand is, what audience you're talking to. There is no one formula, and that's amazing, because that's why possibly we are all in our jobs and we're getting paid, because there is no formula. But that's that. I mean, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. I mean, a couple of years back, we were talking about traditional media and new age media. Now we've stopped talking about it, right? So I think in coming years, we'll stop talking about treating them differently, because data gives you insights which builds creativity. Creative drives conversation, actions, behavior, which drive data. So it's like, it's a circular economy in a way. And as the sooner that we, adopt that data mindset, and that's a very difficult journey. It's not very easy. I think even for people who understand data, it's still not very easy to convince others who don't understand data. So, it's like a very happy conversation sometimes in the room, and I'm sure all of us are going through that. But the sooner, these two come together and start residing in one dashboard, that's where I think we'll all be very happy, and that's the utopia right now, yes.
Very well.
Puneet, what I feel is I'm going to stand on what Udit said, right? Data and creativity complement each other, but they should not be exclusive. So, taking Udit's example again, right? Data is like a engine, right, in a car, right? It is required. But how beautiful the car has been crafted from the outlook is what creativity is. So it's like, they're complementing each other. So either of the two, if they're disconnected, right, you will have a lot of no's rather than yes in terms of, people going for that particular car. So I think this is far more important, and the marketers needs to understand that data fuels the right audiences so that, you reach to the right people. But the message is from a creative. That message has to be crafted beautifully. Even if I take you to the right audiences, but your message is not crafted beautifully in the form of creative, right, then you're losing the game, because you're not generating the interest. Because we all believe that, data is going to create the instant conversion. No, because it totally depends on how do you resonate your product to them, right? And I see there's still a total disconnect in terms of connecting data to programmatic, where dynamic creative optimization has been used. Right, a same creative shown to a user again and again probably might not create an impact until and unless, where Someli was talking about integrating our CDPs or customer data, first party data, then, building that bank of emotions and understanding, what is critical. It's almost like, I'm sitting in front of YouTube and I'm seeing a Like Me ad. It doesn't affect me at all, right? How beautiful the creative was, I'm not the right audience. Yeah. So this is where I feel that, they complement each other, but they're not exclusive. Yes, but they're both essential for any campaign.
Very true.
I think the answer is both affirmative and negative. See, saying data and creativity are mutually exclusive is, in today's context, is like saying, is technology, our technology and life separable? You know, the point is one necessarily governs, and the other necessarily drives things, right? I think data governs everything that you do, including the creative process to a large extent today. But the actual process of creativity does have those rooms where they are not driven by data only. Where probably the right brain takes over and takes it to a different level altogether. But Tabriz is right. The point remains is, as marketeers, the biggest challenge is what is the purpose of creativity? What are you creating what for, right? And when you're looking at businesses and across categories, you do realize that the ROI-driven mindset ultimately makes you look at data as be all and end all of everything. And that starts driving then, a whole lot of processes from there. So it's not an easy answer to find, to be very frank. But to say that creativity as a process can exist in a silo, no, that's not possible anymore, because everything is data governed.
But that brings me to the other point, which is that whilst there is complementarity and data, in a sense, there is an interplay between data and creative leading to more data being created in terms of what do people respond to better, and therefore, how best to communicate with them further from there onwards. But there is another element to it, which is that, and Ruchika, you touched upon it, which is if you have too much data, at times it becomes very difficult to distill the essence as such, and sometimes data in itself kind of could potentially stifle creativity or the instinct that one has. So sometimes data can kind of at times be at variance with the instinct. Have you come across such instances, and what, in your view, in your experiences, are the ways whereby which can be processes that can be used to kind of avoid the pitfalls of completely missing the the essence of what the data is saying?
So, so I don't have an immediate example to give you where at least I've personally gone through this one, but yes, overload of data is something that pretty much every marketer would put a hand up on, saying that there is too much data. I mean, we were discussing this in the meeting as well, on saying that the number of dashboards and none of them talking to each other itself is one of the biggest pain points of any marketer's life. I think what I have used, at least, and this is only something I can share from my personal experiences, I've believed in the fact that data helps me hone my creativity. It helps me hone my gut. But that data needs to be backed up with pretty solid, test control or some amount of testing, because that is what has helped me in my journey as a marketer a lot. So when I, for example, use data to develop a new solar campaign that we just recently launched, we went through an extensive amount of data crunching on it, including the decision journeys, the profile of consumers who are buying, the early adopters, because it's still a nascent category. We don't have established habits, to kind of look at and everything. The data could have led us to a direction where it pointed us to only reason A. However, what helped us tremendously was that the team felt very strongly that every interaction that we were doing ourselves with individual consumers or users of that journey, while that X factor was important, but there was also the Y and Z, which was maybe not a stated verbally as strong a reason or a barrier and everything else. So what we decided to do was that we took a call on it to say that we will not develop one main creative. We actually developed 3 different creatives, addressing all 3 of them. And today, thankfully media allows you to target, and I'm not going into what TV does or what radio does or what digital does. It is just media, right? So today it is something that allows you to actually contextually place the relevant message for the audiences. And that has helped us a lot. It has, kind of borne fruit. It's just been a month or so. But the kind of leads and direct leads, so this is again not counting on any other data point, but traffic on our website and leads that we're getting, that's kind of paid heat. It's reaffirmed the fact that all three were equally actually important to the end user.
It's great that we've got three marketers from very different spaces as such altogether. So Sumeli, in your view, how would you avoid such pitfalls of overreading the data at times and kind of missing out on the instinct that a person has?
Okay, so I'll take two examples because it's always easier to talk through examples, and these are the brands that you know. So one case is of Thumbs Up Palate, which is more strong on storytelling backed by data. But the data is obviously doing a secondary role over there. Creative is what is in the driving seat. And the second brand is Sprite, where data is in the lead seat and creative is enabling data. So it's literally DCO, it's different creative for different data. So I'll just give you a base of why we were very clear what's the role of data, what's the role of creative, and therefore obviously there would be obviously heated arguments across the table. But since we are very clear what's the role of data and what's the role of creative, it's an easier journey, so to speak, and that's the way I try and navigate it. For Thumbs Up, it was very clear we were coming with a new, I wouldn't say new, but a repurposed positioning, which is thumbs down to naysayers, which was coming from the core of Thumbs Up. Then therefore Palate was the story that we wanted to say. How data helped is to figure out what story to say, who to use to tell the story, what story needs to be told where. But what was at the driving seat is the creative to tell the storytelling, because it was a part of creative that got amplified by data. So we are very clear on that. Sprite, on the other end, when we repurposed, again, I'm not calling it repositioning, it's repurposed to saying that there is heat that happens, heat as in mental heat, where you are fried and you are like, you're very, very heated up in your head because of the situations that is around you, and that situation can happen from anything. It could be exams, it could be traffic, it could be meetings, it could be anything and everything, right? And therefore the Sprite comes as a contrarian thing to the voice of heat. For this, in fact, we did work together with Bobble AI and to do a fantastic campaign together, and with multiple other partners. It was very clear the signals were very important, where heat is happening. And once we had identified those signals, whether it's traffic, whether it's integrating with the API, whether it's integrating through conversations, and the conversation, especially when we work together, on what exactly was the conversation happening, and therefore push that message over there and push that content over there. So that was completely data at the driving seat, and the creative then following the lead of data. So I think once we are very clear on these two, this couldn't have happened in case of Thumbs Up. And storytelling couldn't have happened in case of Sprite, because then it would have been a broadcast and nobody would have been like, whatever. Both of these brands had fantastic results because H1, I think we over-delivered. Obviously, it's not because we did great advertising. There's a lot of other factors to it. But my point is that the brand love scores clearly say that the message has reached to the right audiences. And I totally agree with you that data gives a purpose to creativity. Otherwise, why are we creating, right? So,
I'll just kind of give an example from one of my previous assignments. This was at Magic Bricks, which is India's largest property portal. And while you have tons of examples of where data actually enables creativity and helps you, in better narratives, but there are times when you really go against data as well. At times you do take those calls, for different reasons. So at Magic Bricks, in real estate, the primary audience, the target audience, always has been the man. Right? It's always presumed that it's the male of the house who's going to look for property or do the purchase decisions, and so on and so forth. It has always been a very masculine category to say so. And if you would see majority of the imagery that is propagated by all the brands, you would have the man of the house, and then you would have family in the background. There's a little child there somewhere, etc., so on and so forth. But the man is always the decision maker, and that's how it's always presented. This was way back in 17, 18 when we were looking at our next campaign. The data would have suggested to go the same route. right? Because the data was no different. You still had 65-70% of the searches happening from the, male gender, and there were other cuts of that data as well. But the creative idea on the table was one where you were putting both man and woman of the house, the couple, as the protagonist and the decision makers. So women were equal partners in taking that decision of investing in a dream home. Now, data may not have led you there, but it's the creative thought that was on the table, corroborated with data to really see whether it's going to make sense or you're going absolutely off the track and not going to be acceptable. And the decision, therefore, we took was to go ahead with the creative idea at that point of time, not look at the data and what data was saying, and to really start that narrative in the category, where you are presenting both the genders as equal partners in decision making per se, right? And so there are times when you really go beyond data, or to an extent not look at what data is also telling you, and look at the power of the creative idea and take that forward and execute.
I think your question was precisely in terms of having lots of data and how do we manage that data, right? So what I see, there's a problem, right? Because the more touch points are required, it is not the ample amount of data. More than that, I think it is all about recency of the data as well. So, I mean, if you go to an aggregated model, for instance, you have a lot of service provider who basically aggregate data from multiple third parties and they sell it to advertisers and marketers. You need to understand that, too much of data is hard to analyze. Yeah. And you need to look at the collection process of the data as well, because let's say if I go to Car Dekho once, I may not be a potential auto lover, right? This could be one of the instances where I landed up, right? But what is more important is that, the aggregation model has disadvantages. Why? Because you don't have too many touch points. You only have personas, which has been created with the intention of visits, right? And that is what's been sold into the market. What advertisers and marketers has to look at is in terms of effective CPM, not the carpet bombing on a data, right? So internet lover, right? I think everybody nowadays is an internet lover, right? So it can't be a global segment, right?
Internet liver.
Yeah, so we are all internet lovers, right? So I mean, that's A, the selection of the wrong data. B is that the source of the data. Third is you need to cut down and understand, how these data points are basically tabularized or tabloid, right, with the different touch points. My interaction, if I'm targeting somebody, let's say somebody wants to target somebody who loves food, because probably that is going to come with the Coke bottle, right, because he's going to order that, right? So he needs to look at delivery options, right? Probably a 10 minutes delivery or Zomato's or Swiggy's of the world, and understand people who are consuming a lot spicy food, right? If they are ordering, let's say tandoori, they're gonna complement that with Coke as well, right? So that is where we need to look at. So it's not about having more, because obviously whenever I tell agencies that I have only 1 million cohort of this particular segment, they say it's too less, right? So I'm saying that okay, you want to spend 30 rupees, right, for a CPM of 8 million data. I'm saying just spend 60 million on just 1 million data. So that effectiveness comes out with reading the touch points on the data. So yes, it's a problem that too much of data creates a lot of confusion and waste of budgets as well.
Very well said. And therefore, the important, and that really leads me to the next aspect that we want to cover, which is, then is there a kind of a process, which is in place to allow marketers to be able to dovetail data better with the creative output as such? And if there is a process, would you want to expand on it? So I'll start with you, Udit. How does data kind of feed into or inform the creative process in your
Firstly,
view?
I'll start with the previous question. I think there's too much to measure. But what to measure and when to measure, even directionally, is the bigger question. There have been eras of last touch, first touch, CPM, CTRs, but does that really matter in the overall journey of what's happening on ground? These are indicative data sets or directive data sets. So when it comes to measurability, what are we measuring more than the dashboards makes a ton of a difference. Now coming back to how does data enable creativity, like you said, or how do we go through the iterative process? I'll just cite an example.
In fact, before that, is there a process? Is there a process to it, or is that in itself something that is horses for courses? It kind of varies depending on the use case.
So there is no, I would say, logbook, or there is no guide that can say this is how you measure. Where, like Sumeli said, where your brand is, what your brand wants to achieve, the strategy is devised basis that. I'll just give you an example. When we were planning the Hector launch, there was nothing considered to be as an internet car. There was no internet car back in 2019. Now, if I had to analyze data and if I had gone by the industry status quo, there was no need of an internet car. Everything was still happening. Everything was partly connected. There were voice assistants, but there were no voice assistants inside the car. That was our product truth that essentially we used, So that is one example where category never experienced, let's say, something that had internet and voice enabled stuff in it. So where would you find data for it? How would you do the product validation for it? So that's where, second party data or category data actually helped. Right. That in that segment in which Hector was operating, it was all masculinity. There was no humanization of technology, and that's the data set that we used to enable the campaign. Actually, I don't know if you guys remember, Benedict was our brand ambassador when we launched it. It said, MG Hector, it's a human thing. So we didn't focus on the fact that this is a masculine car, itta power hai, itta fuel efficiency hai, this is what it will deliver. We said this is a car that can listen to you, respond to you, talk to you like a normal human being. So it entirely shifted how cars are perceived to be in the connected world today. They are collecting data. Right. And now that data, I'm again telling you the stage where the data is coming from, is enabling us, okay, which are the next set of apps that we need to choose, that customers are using. Let's say Gaana inside our car is the most used app even before the maps. So podcast or audio is something that we are gung-ho about finding new partners. And that's how we even changed it in our next car, which was Aster. We had JioSaavn. Right. We said, why don't give customers the choice for music? So again, there is no method to this madness, but there may be cases where data will exist already. There may be, where you are defying data to see how will it turn around. And we actually took that leap of trust in certain scenarios. So there is no guide or there is no thumb rule ke aise hi hoga. There is nothing like it. I think it is an experimentative and iterative process. You win some battles and you lose some as well.
Sure. Thanks. Sumeli, what would be your take on this?
Okay, so I'll tell you how we work, and I think all of the companies work very differently because we are also in different life stages as a company in terms of what we are doing and what we try to achieve and the kind of data we have. So for us, we have a lot of data. So we do a very deep dive on social listening, social metrics, digital metrics. We run a lot of panel with you, Kantar. So we get a lot of data. But I think the point is not getting the data. The point is the story that you kind of tell, the patterns that you see. Because for us, the insights have to be very, very deep. Every brand that we have in the portfolio is a brand that you either connect with or you don't. As simple as that. It's not just being visible, it's about the entire funnel of it, obviously, which is now no longer a funnel. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with the awareness, consideration and purchase. But the point is that we try and look for patterns. So while we do post-campaign analysis, but they're only post-campaign analysis. Brand analysis largely looks at patterns that are changing, so which is not done at a very short interval of time. Because that's very important for us. We rarely do moment marketing. I mean, it may or may not happen, but it's not a big part of our existence. Viral, if it happens, great, but I think what needs to happen is it needs to move the brand metrics. So the data that kind of moves the brand metrics, and obviously it's a nice theory to give right now, it's not a very easy thing to actually do and look at that. But that is what we try and do. Because internally also it's the same thing. It's almost like a pitch process, right? Because every company has a particular budget assigned to it at a portfolio level. And everybody who is internally there, and it doesn't matter whether you're in category, in media or whatever, you're literally trying to build a story to figure out how much budget your brand, your activity, your campaign can have. So it's about looking the right metrics and seeing the right patterns, and therefore are you able to build that story? I think that's more important to me, and that's the way we kind of operate, rather than saying that, okay, let's just do an analysis and see what happens. And I believe that's how largely all of us operate. I'm just trying to simplify it. But patterns over just data analysis is the way we kind of go with. A blip is great, we should notify it and we should bank it, but maybe not take a decision basis. That's the way we try and operate.
Great. Ruchika, your views on this?
I actually completely agree with what Sumeli is talking about. I've been a researcher before being a marketer. I am a very, very strong proponent of the fact that blips are not the decision points unless and until you see it becoming a part of the main data trend itself. But trending is by far the biggest learning and biggest thing to cash in on, and that only comes with a constant eye on data rather than a just a one in this thing. So what even we try and do is that when we are coming up with a new campaign or a new initiative that is being undertaken, that is the time to sit and pause and just look at the trends and look at the data points that you have so far. And then take calls on basis that. But other than that, having a set process around it, not really.
Tabrez, Prasun?
I think, yes, we need to understand the current ecosystem as well, right, to complement, the two processes of data versus creativity. The way we operate right now, it is brand decides what message they need to send, right? So you can't have audiences, right, in hand before, right, to send that message. So first the brand decide, like Sumeli said, that, Sprite synonymous to, let's say, for instance, heat or anything. So, after that, once that message has been decided by the brand, then we look out for those areas or geographies, where you have a lot of heat, and probably, this is where we need to push. That is where the data is going to come in. We are far away changing those sort of processes. Why? Because TV, we're not talking about here, because TV, if you have to rotate a lot of creativity, right, it's a lot of money, right? When you talk about digital, it's possible, right? Because the biggest problem is, we need to understand all these things are in silos, right? You have a market research company which brings the sentiments to you, right? The second thing is that, basis that the creative agency creates a product because they have a brand message to convey to the consumers. Then you look out for agencies who can basically send that message to the right people. The time this has all been, this all can be done within one roof, then I think even this is going to be possible, which is, you have a research, analytics available, you have the audience available, and you have a right message going out. That is where you can think about, in fact, evangelizing on creatives as well.
I think just building a little bit on Tabrez's point and expanding this a little bit. See, there are, and he was right, there are zillions of data points and there are different sources of data, right? And for a marketeer to look at all those sources and all those data points coming and then putting all of this together and then making sense of it and then letting it govern the creative process, etc., is, I think it's a tough ask to begin with, right? And so, I mean, let's take the example of Just Dial. We have about 700,000 unique users on a daily basis on the platform. Now that itself is humongous data, right? Then you have social media, then you have third-party data, then you have, there are multiple data points that you're looking at, and then you're trying to find a common thread across all of this to really be able to take a decision. I think we also need to work, and I think this is work in progress pretty much, and I think, people like Bubble and all are helping a lot in the sense that you got to be bringing all these data points together, and you have to have that one linear kind of a method of, looking at all of them, removing duplications out of this, and really looking at what is it that you can really read as a trend. Because, as she rightly said, mostly you end up reading trend because, the amount of data is so vast that, getting into every small segment of that may or may not be fruitful as well, at the end of the day, right? So broad trends, coming out of all of this, but this remains a challenge, and we have to wait through this challenge, and therefore, I think some part of creativity process also, kind of is not as influenced by data because of all these problems that are there, right? That you think of a message first, then you start working backwards, and so on and so forth. The point that he was making, those things are changing, and there's a lot, much more and more data now starting to govern the kind of campaigns you would wish to do, or the narratives that you would want to have, or the messages that you want to give. A lot of this is now data driven, but then I don't think it's very coherent.
I think we need to have that correction process, pre and post campaign, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't, taking about, we were just discussing offline, right? If you don't have a correct measurement process, you can't measure it.
Very true.
If you don't have a correct sentiment collection process, you can't send the right message.
Absolutely, the message will not
So
right.
those are really very probabilistic or panel-based analysis right now. If you go to market research companies to understand, they collect a sample data set. We need to move to the real customers, right? And that is where, the collaboration of first-party data versus second-party data, rather than going out of the wall gardens or data aggregators, that has to evolve from the marketer perspective. They should be ready to, so maybe would have one information, people buying Sprite or Coke, right? But what are their intents? What are their behaviors? Where they're spending time, right? It's going to solve even the problem of campaign allocation as well, right? Where do I reach my customer? Which platform should I choose? The budget allocation becomes a very easy process then, that, my sort of people are available, let's say, on Facebook. That should be the medium where I should spend, rather than Facebook putting a compulsion saying that, you should spend more with me.
Right.
So I think this pre and post campaign analysis on a real deterministic first party data set is what is required.
Absolutely, I agree. And there is another element to it, which is, when we are looking at either an effectiveness measurement of the campaign, or, developing the campaign and informing it basis data by deciphering patterns that are really defining that particular consumer cohort, that has a human element clearly that seems to be kind of, coming out. But at the same time, we are also in a world where companies like Bubble AI are interpreting patterns and behaviors in themselves. And how do you see the future as such, as this kind of, evolves this new world of trained supervised learning or unsupervised learning gradually, and the algorithms that are being created, which are kind of, able to decipher patterns. What is your view as such, and whether that in itself is something that is going to start having a play in the creative development process, or more than the creative development process, I would also say the messages that need to be delivered to the customer at at various stages of his or her journey. How do you see that, Tabrez?
It's like I said that, the data touch points today cannot be a cohort which is created on a request, right? It should be more predictive, backed up by AI and ML to understand that, this is what the right audience for you. We have still not moved from those ready-made cohorts or customized cohort where, we combine, we filter, then we give it to you guys to advertise upon, and then we are happy to see a 0.5% CTR or 1% CTR, right? Udit has very good example that they've been able to launch cars without running TV commercials. Yeah. So the point is this, is something where they have a trust on data because they've been adapting technology to measure that data, probably through Adobe's or different cloud managements. So similarly, what we feel is that understanding patterns of the users is quite critical, right? It's not that difficult. Why? Because they broadcast patterns, right? They show intents. And Bobble AI being a conversation platform, we need to even push right creative to the right conversation or context as well. That is where, the success of the keyboard is. So if I'm saying that, I'm happy and I'm giving a very good creative or emoticon of, probably a happy person or that particular emoji or a big emoji, because this is how I do my prediction, right? Rather than suggesting a word, I'm suggesting a creative over there, right? And Gen Zs and millennials, they are far more expressive in terms of using a thumbs up instead of writing I'm all right? So by virtue of which we understand a lot of things from the consumer that, hey, this is where they're interested, this is what they're going to buy. They broadcast a lot of intent, going out for coffee, buying a phone or anything. So we basically take this entire information to our CDP. We create different touch points of the users. We understand their patterns not by just one visit. We'll see there's a user which is constantly on, let's say, a food tech site or an application. We see that constantly whenever he goes over there, he's only ordering South Indian food. Then I build the affinity. Then probably it helps me in terms of giving him the right content. Why? Because I know my customer very well. Now this information on a secured way, right, can be given to an advertiser as well, who can utilize it. I mean, even Google does it, everybody does it, because this is all consented data. What I see, and that is where brands are integrating with us to reach through a very different creative medium, is what we call like CMM or conversation media marketing. So Meli has done that, where we can have a separate sort of creative which can be created and tag certain words to it. So if somebody says thirsty, cold drink or anything, I can recommend a brand sticker over there that, you can push that. I mean, this was not possible. You can't advertise on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, but your brand can be pushed to multiple people at a given point of time. And the sort of sharing we have seen is huge. So I think this is where everybody needs to change, where we had to move out of the aggregation model and combine more data sets so that the creativity, data, all things combined, we are able to read the customer journey and then curate our campaign accordingly.
So do you see a future where the emotional intelligence of human beings and their ability to interpret data and connect with it from a human story standpoint will in a sense get added to or subtracted by machine learning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, that's what.
Absolutely, I mean, we do it. We have another product which is called CTS, where we've been integrating our creatives within the conversation or chatbots as well. Just to give more emotional impact to the conversation. Chatbot writing, I'll be back, and there's a photograph of customer service rep or his caricatures and a very interesting, I'll be back, right, or something like that. The customer feel that he's been listened, right? So yes, you can change the emotions as well. The ML and AI has this entire fantastic understanding of people's emotions, then predict it. It's been used everywhere.
Scary.
So we are at 4 minutes, just got 4 minutes left. So any final comments on this particular aspect? Otherwise, maybe we can also take in a few audience questions as well.
I just wanted to make one small point, a contrary point to the, to what Tabir was saying. See, yes, data, if you ask any CMO, any marketeer, which is the religion you follow, everyone will say we follow data. That's the only religion we have. But at the same point of time, you would ask, data is fine when it comes to understanding consumers, understanding what works, what doesn't work, etc., etc. He said it's going to give you content, right? But content as information versus content as narrative are two different things altogether, right? That's one point.
Content and context.
Okay. The second point is just ask. Amul comes to you every week with a news story, right? What data are they looking at? While kind of crafting that, right? And they're connecting with you at some level, at emotional level as well, right? When probably Pidilite did, that famous campaign, right? What data they were looking at, right? So at some point of time, at some level, creativity as a process does become kind of independent of data. But yes, you cannot deny the importance of data. But in future, if you say data is going to make everything and do everything, then that's a little scary.
Thanks.
I'm going to just add a provocation over here. So you do have, I mean, right now I'm saying it's today. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. None of us can predict. But today you do have successful AI newsreader, but you don't have a successful AI comedian. So that's the status today. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. Maybe you'll have.
Very well summarized, actually. So, thanks a lot for putting it that way. Can we open this up for audience questions? And there are quite a few hands that are going up, as I see. So, is there someone who can pass the mics around? Gentleman there.
We will allow just one question. I think in the interest of time, we are running slightly off the schedule.
Can I add one more provocation? Okay, we are talking in terms of marketing. The ultimate objective of any marketer is branding and performance. For an agency who's communicating, their challenge is positioning and creativity. We have, on the other hand, data, which helps you in terms of identifying the need gaps, identifying the segment, targeting the specific segments, and then talking in terms of what are the communication needs. Having identified the communication needs, you're talking about rational, emotional, which brings in neuroscience as well as behavioral economics. And then let's talk about complications which arise in the US market, where they have no credibility as far as advertising is concerned. People don't believe it. It's only used as a reminder media. And third thing is the attention span within 7 seconds. Can we put everything together and put a process in place?
That is the holy grail, isn't it?
I wish, I know. That was my response to I wish.
So, anyone, any thoughts on this? My view on this is that, and as it has been said by multiple panel members, is that there are no silver bullets here. It depends on the situation, depends on the brand, its context, and therefore what is it that is most apt for the brand at the, and there could be varying situations also. You're looking to build the brand, you're looking to kind of get quick sales. So those situations are the ones that you're kind of tapping into.
I'll add IMC to that.
Sorry?
Multiple audiences, multiple requirements, multiple communication methods.
Absolutely.
IMC into it.
Yeah. So and they're being done at scale and 24/7. So that's yeah.
And country-wise preferences, cross-cultural preferences.
No,
Absolutely.
it is possible. And sir, I mean, you made a point about decreasing attention spans, right?
Yeah.
And so for a consumer who has only got 5 seconds to take a decision, right? How much of creativity you want to really push to the consumer,
Exactly. That's the point.
right? So you have to also take all those things into account. So yes, data also will play a very, very critical role. But today's
Data
topic
will
was
give
very
you only
interesting.
directions.
Sorry?
The question is, data does not give you creativity.
It doesn't. It
So
doesn't.
therefore-
It doesn't.
It doesn't. It doesn't. That's something that is established. It's something that informs. So thanks a lot. It's been a very wonderful discussion. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.